Welcome back, folks. This is part 2 of what has now become a mini-series on building a to-do list in React with TypeScript, custom hooks, styled components, and more. We're walking through this live, step-by-step, what my process would be, so I hope you find this helpful. As a recap, this is what we are working towards. We are creating this to-do list where we can add tasks, complete tasks, delete tasks, clear completed down below, and then this focus tab over on the right where we can see one task at a time, mark it completed, and even this nope button down below where if we don't want to work on this task, we can hit that and it will change to another random task. Where we are so far, what we did in part 1 is we really built out the functionality of this application. So we can add our first, second, and third task here. We can delete things, we can complete things, we can go to focus view and just found a bug. We can go to focus view and it should show us our first non-completed task or a random non-completed task. That's interesting, we'll fix that. Clear our completed ones, and so on. So in this video, first thing we're going to do is we didn't actually save this state to our browser, so if we refreshed our screen, then we'd lose our to-do list. Not cool. So we're going to build out a custom hook to store this in local storage. Then I'm going to clean up the data access, data model a little bit, pull this stuff out into kind of its own hook. We'll get there. And then if we still have time at the end of this one, I might end up doing a part 3, we'll see. Then we'll actually get to the styling. So let's get going. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use hooks to store this state in local storage. Now, there are going to be lots of pre-built hooks out there. I could easily go and grab something off the shelf, something that's used and written and popular, but we're going to build this one from scratch just as an exercise in what it looks like to build a hook and how that might work. So if we review our app component here, this is our top level component in this application. And it is what really stores the tasks. So it has the state of tasks, which is just an array of our custom type task here. And it also stores which one is the focused task. So because this is just a plain old use state, if I refresh my screen here, it's not going to keep my state. So let's create a hook that uses local storage to persist this state. So I'm going to pop open my source tree here, and I'm going to create a new file inside of a folder called hooks, and I think I'll call this use local storage. And a hook is really just a function. So I want to call this use local storage. And if I look at the typical API for hooks, a lot of times you'll pass in some initializers into this function. So I do want to pass in our initial, or let's call it our new state. But I also want to pass in what is the local storage key that we would be looking for. If you're not familiar with local storage in the browser, it's a key value system. So you have a key, it has a value, and that's how you save and retrieve items. I'm actually going to pass this in first as the key. And then our new state would be the initial state that we would use if one in local storage didn't exist. So this is going to be a function. We're going to make it our default export. And now we can go. Actually, let me type these. So key is going to be of type string. All of our local storage keys are strings. Now, new state. I'm not designing this hook specific to our to-do app here. I'm actually building up a generic hook that we could use for anything. So I don't actually know the type of this state. So I'm going to create a new generic type called tstate. And I'm going to make that a generic here, just like that. Okay, great. Now let's get going on this. So the first thing I want to do when this initializes is I want to see if we already have state saved in local storage for this given key. So let's see, let's grab a variable, or make a variable called state. We're going to access the window.local storage, and we're going to say get item at this key. So this state is either going to be a string or a null. There's a very key here. The key value system in local storage in the browser doesn't save objects that we might be used to in JavaScript. It saves a string. So we have to encode and decode our values in order to save and retrieve these. So let's call this, well, this is a state. Okay, so this is fine. So state is either going to be a string or null. If it's null, then we can use our new state. If it's a string, then we will we'll have to parse that as JSON. So let's see here. I think I want to say, so we'll call this state string. So I'm trying to figure out what to call this. Now our state will be, if state string exists, then we'll do json.parse, and we'll parse that state string. Otherwise, we're going to use our new state. Now, .parse here doesn't know what type this is going to return. So we see our state type here is really any. We're going to make an assumption here that when we parse this, it's going to end up being that tstate type that we defined. So now if we inspect our state, then we can see that this is in fact tstate. We're going to build up this hook as we go here. If I look at how useState works, in fact, I'm going to pull this app down below so we can see this while we're working. If I look at how useState works, it returns an array of two items. The first is the current value, and the second is a function that allows us to update that value. So if I'm building up my hook here, I want to return something very similar to this. In fact, that exact same API, an array of two items where the first is the current state and the second is a function to update the state. So we're going to return the state, and then we're going to return an updater. So update state. And we'll create that function. Now, so in update state, we need to accept a new state. We need to save that to local storage, and we also need this to end up returning inside the return of this hook. So the first item is pretty easy. We need to update local storage. So what we can do is call window.local storage. Of course, we're going to have to pass in a new state here. So let's pass in the updated state. I'll just call that state for now. That's of type tstate. We will set item in local storage to be the key. And we can't just pass in state here. We can see that that's going to give us a red squiggly. We can't pass in state because that is of type T state. So we need to stringify this with json.stringify so that it can be made into a string that we can save to local storage. So we'll do json.stringify state, and there we go. Now we have retrieving from local storage and saving to local storage. But just because we've saved this here doesn't mean the state we're returning out of this hook will be updated, because we are only retrieving, or we are retrieving this every time actually. That is not going to be the most performant though, because we are encoding and decoding from JSON every time. So what I would like to do instead, I think, is actually store this with a useState hook locally in memory while we have this app running. So let's do that. I think that's what I want to do. Okay, we're going to start this and we may back out. So let's say our memory state and our set memory state is going to be a useState React hook. So this demonstrates we can use hooks within custom hooks, which is pretty cool. So we want to use state, and this is the tricky part. So the useState hook here, it accepts our initial state value, and this is what I'm thinking through in my head. This new state that we're passing into the hook, we only want to use that if one in local storage doesn't yet exist. If it does exist, then we want to use that. I know what we can do. Okay, so I'm going to use state here, and I'm going to pass along our generic that says use state will always be of type T state. There is a great feature in hooks where instead of passing in a value here, we can pass in a function. A function will allow us to only run this function if useState has not yet been initialized. So the very first time this hook is called within a component, this function will be called to fetch an initial value for this state. But every other time that function is called within the component, this function won't be run. So this is a great way to do something that is maybe a bit less performant, maybe slower. In local storage, I don't think is really very slow, but it will help just ever so slightly because we're doing this parsing. So let me move this up into our function. And instead of setting the state variable, I'm going to return this. So let me recap a bit here. So useState is going to be our in-memory state of whatever we are storing in here. The first time it is initialized, we will end up checking local storage to see if we have anything in there. If we do, we'll parse it as JSON. If not, we're going to use this new state object that we've passed in. I really like that a lot. Okay, I'm going to rename my variables here, state and set state. Okay, excellent. So update state, we're still saving to local storage, I like that. But the next thing we need to do is we need to update our in-memory state. Actually, I think I'll make that the first thing. Yeah, we'll make it the second. I don't think it matters. Set state, and we will set that to the new state passed in. Because we are using set state here, This will update our state in memory, which updates the current value of state, which updates this first value that we're returning from the hook. So we haven't tested this yet, but I'm fairly confident that this will work. We'll see. But this is an example of writing your own custom hook that you can use within a React component for really whatever functionality you need. And we're even using an existing React hook inside of our custom hook. So let's move forward and use our new hook in our implementation. So in our app here, we have useState for our array of tasks and useState also for our focus task ID. So let's use this. So instead of useState here, I'm going to say use local storage. And this will be of type task array. I need to pass in a key. So I'm going to say, let's store this in the key tasks. Okay, I like that. And we could also do the same thing for our focus task down here. It's not an array, it's not an object, it's just a string or even undefined. I'm interested how that undefined will work with our JSON parsing. Let's see. So useState, let's do our use local storage. This may end up as a bug, I'm not sure. The first thing we'll do is a key, so focused. I'll just make that the key. And then we have our initial state. Alrighty. Okay, update state. We have a few issues here. First of all, our updater can accept a function. So that is interesting. So we have one implementation that just accepts one value and one implementation that sets a function. I could re-implement that same thing, where I have a function that either accepts a function or accepts a value. That sounds a little complicated, and I think there's actually a different way that we could do this that would be simpler and piggyback off of this setState function that already exists, that already does exactly that. So I'm going to refactor this use local storage hook a little bit. So this setState value, I'm actually going to just directly pass that out of our hook. And I think that will end up fixing this down here. If I save that, does that change? Task has no call signature. Expressions not callable. Not all constituents of task are callable. Task has no call signature. Okay, I'm a little confused as to what's going on there. I'm going to continue about this path though and see if we can resolve that. So now that I'm directly passing in this set state, I can see that this update state never gets called. So how can we hook on to something, no pun intended, how can we hook on to in any time this state is updated, we want to save this to local storage? Well, that sounds a lot like use effect. And I think we can do just that. So we will use effect, which itself accepts a function, and then an array of dependencies. So use effect calls this function every time this hook runs, both the first time and if any of the dependencies change. So useEffect is a great way to call a function anytime things change. So I want to call this every time our state changes. And in that function, I can save the state to local storage. And now I don't need this anymore. Now let's see, it has a missing dependency key. Okay, well, key is not likely to change. However, there may be some edge cases there, so we'll do that. So now, anytime state, or key perhaps, changes, we will update what we are saving in local storage. I actually like that solution better, and it does help us to even better mirror what is coming out of the default native useState function that React provides. So I'm not sure why we have these types of errors here. Let me just save all of my work here. And let's see. Tasks. Set tasks. Ah, okay. This is interesting. So if I'm glad I saw this. This was a coincidence. If I inspect my state here, tasks should really be a task array. And set tasks should be this React dispatch type. But both of them are the same type and with this or. That's because by default, arrays will, Typescript infers that arrays could be any type that is present in the array stated here. So instead of that, I'm going to say as const. And what that should do is specifically type each item in the array as what it is here. I like that. Okay, so now tasks is in fact a task array, and set task is that React dispatch. Another option here would be to actually make the return type of this function, and then that would be fine. I could go in here and say the return type is an array, where the first item is task this, and then the second item is that React dispatch. I'm not going to type all that out. That would be the alternative here, and that would work fine as well. Okay, so I think that that will clear up our error, a cross-origin error. That is very odd. I'm going to restart my server. Let me go to my server here, Control-C out of that, restart this and see if we get the same error. We do get the same error. React doesn't have access to the actual error object in development. Okay, I'm going to switch this one back to use state. Again, I'm not really sure what this undefined. Okay, so there's something very strange with this string or undefined for our focus. I could spend some time debugging that, but I'm not going to do that now. I think what I could do is change this to an object, and then that would be fine. I don't want to take the time to debug what that is, because that's kind of a very specific edge case. So I'm going to stick with use state for now, And the effect that will have is that every time we load this app, the focus task might be different. So it might not save our focus task. We could switch this to use local storage, change this into an object that has a string in it instead of being string or undefined. So I'm just going to leave this as is, and we're going to use our use local storage hook for our tasks array. So the test. Let's see if it works. First, second, third. Already we have a good sign here that our state is updating. Let's complete our second task. Now, let's refresh. Yes. Okay, so we are loading up our state successfully, other than our focus here. We're loading up our state successfully from local storage, and that is working great. Excellent. Okay, this is a great time for a commit. So in the app, we switched out our use state to be use local storage, and then we made our use local storage hook. So add use local storage hook. Great. All right. That's really not bad for designing a custom hook. We've got 16 or so lines of code here, and that's some nice functionality to add to our app. Next thing I'd like to do before we move on to styling. In our app component, which again is our top level component here, we have a lot going on. And really it's a lot of data management. We've got the initializing of the tasks, saving the focus task, what to do when we add something, updating the completion, the focus, we got shuffling. We're even creating a tasks API object here. We've got a lot going on. I'd like to extract this out and create something that we can use from anywhere within the app and get access to our tasks. So that is another great use case for a hook, and let's build it together. So in hooks, I'm going to create a hook called use tasks store, or use task store. And use task store will be a way that we can access our tasks, almost like a local database sort of thing. And it will also provide us an API that we can use, much like the one we have built up in the app component. In fact, I'm going to copy in the app component stuff. So let's create our scaffolding here. So use task store is some sort of function, and we will make that our default export. By the way, when you're creating a hook, you don't have to import React necessarily. Whenever you're creating a React component, even if you're not calling the React object, you do have to import React so that it's present. But a hook is really just a function. There is nothing special about it other than the way React uses it. But the way it's defined, it's really just a function, so you don't have to import React. Okay, I'm going to take almost everything here that involves data management, cut that, and place it in our use task store. Now I'm going to fix imports. So I'm going to control space here. Of course, that's not going to help me out. Thanks, VS Code. Import use local store, use local storage from use local storage. Okay. Task. Oh my goodness. What if I save this? No. Okay. We have our types. Okay. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to manually type these out. Import task from types use state. Okay. Okay, nanoid, nano ID. Shuffle comes from Lodash. Const tasks API. This is actually going to be what we return. I'm going to call this just API and return API. I could do that together. Okay, there's something else in VS Code I liked, which is organize imports. You see that I have like a same directory import, then a parent directory import, then package imports. I like them being in a certain order, and organize imports in VS Code puts them in a nice order and alphabetical according to their type. Just another little tip. Okay, so I've moved everything that has to do with data management into this use task store API. And we have that here. Now, some caveats. This use task store API has a local version of its state of the world and stores in local storage. But this use task store, if I called this hook in more than one place, it's going to have kind of its own state of the world. Kind of, because we have the same key here, but it will really have its own state of the world because it will have its own in-memory version of that. What I'd like to actually be able to do is to be able to call this hook anywhere in the app, anywhere in the tree, and access the same data. Now, where might that be handy? That might be handy in a case where, say we've created a component just for this checkbox, and we wanted to be able to complete and uncomplete a task here in this checkbox. I could perhaps call this hook in order to get some sort of API in order to mark things complete and not complete. So this isn't quite going to work for me. So this is a case where you'd bring in something like context. And from my last video, I explained that I try to avoid context and not overcomplicate things if it's not necessary. But I think we're verging on the arena of necessary here. And again, it's a good exercise to see how we could use context and enable us to call this hook from anywhere in our component tree. So let's do that. All right, I'm going to create another file and yet another directory. So I have a screens directory, a hooks directory. I'm going to have a contexts directory, and I'm going to say task store .ts. Okay, there is a function on React called create context, and you pass it in a default value. So I'm going to say task context is equal to this context. And what we want to do is kind of mirror this same thing here. So we're starting with an empty task array. So I'm going to make the default value here an empty array. I'm going to type this to task array, and now we have this task context object. Now, what this object provides is really two different components. There are two different components on this object. One is the consumer, and one is the provider. And so that allows us to push an object into the overall React context tree and then later use it. So this is a fairly standard way to set up a context. So I'm just going to return task context here if I can spell return. And I think this, oh, not return, export default task context. So I'm going to make this the one and only export from this file, and I think it'll make a little more sense when we use it. Maybe. Context can get a little hairy. Okay, so in our app component, which is going to be a little broken for a while we're in lieu here, I'm going to, because the app component is the highest level component in this tree, this will be a good place to put what's called the provider. So I'm going to say browser router. I'll probably let the router be the very top level thing. Okay, so task context, that's going to auto import for me, provider. And we're going to provide this some sort of value. Okay, so value is going to be something. And then we will complete our component here and move down below and put this here. So before I fill this in, I'd just like to demonstrate that task context provider, we're going to provide some sort of value. And then in any function anywhere, or any component anywhere, like let's say the list screen, what I could do is come in here and use a hook. So let's say use context, and I can pass in my task context, and now this value is going to be the value that I'd put in the app provider up here, the context provider up here, without having to pass a value from component to component to component to component. I can have kind of at the highest level here a context provider, and then access that via a use context hook here pretty much anywhere. So let's hook some things up here and see this working. So what I want to do is I want to be able to have my tasks data provided to anywhere in the app. Okay, so we moved everything over to use task store before. I'm going to close this out here. We moved everything over to use task store before. I'm going to actually switch that, and I'm going to move back our storage of tasks. Actually, now I need the set tasks component, and that's going to need to be in the context as well. Okay, this can get a little tricky and a little meta. So let's see. Okay, I know what we're going to do here. So the provider is going to be this value, which I'm going to get some type errors here. So the provider, this value, I'm actually not going to have this be really directly used by the use context hook and other components. I'm going to use this use task store. I have several different levels going here, so I think it will make sense in a moment. So on the app level, the topmost app level, we have our tasks. We're using a context provider to allow that to be accessed anywhere in the app. I've just changed the type of this though. This is no longer just a task array. It is a task array and a dispatch function. So this is now an array of an array, and I'm just going to create a no-op function here. It's not going to do anything. This is the default value, almost never used, but you do have to have it. Okay, my types are happy here. Now let's get to a little bit of the magic. In my use task store hook, remember when we're creating a custom hook, we can use pre-built React hooks. I'm going to say use context here, and I'm going to use my task context. So what does that mean? That means I have access to my tasks and set tasks that are up in this app level component. So without having to pass tasks and set tasks down from one component to the other, I've moved that into a context or made it accessible via context, and now I have it here within this hook. So that's going to provide us quite a bit of power here. Up in the app, the remaining two errors I have are I've been passing in tasks API. I'm no longer going to do that. Just list screen and focus screen. I can clean up the rest of my imports and save this off. I do have some type errors because these screens are expecting certain types, but let's change that up. So in list screen, instead of requiring tasks props, that's the tasks API I had. Actually, I'm not going to require anything. And I am, instead of pulling all of these functions from props, I'm going to pull them from our use task store. Use task store is providing us this API, kind of this grab bag of functions that we can use. I'm going to clean up my imports again. Okay, let me go do the same thing over on our focus screen. So again, I'm not requiring task props, and we're not passing in these task props, but we are getting those from our use task store hook. So let's refresh. We can see that our state is pulling from local storage. That's good. Let me change the state, refresh, that's good. And I can delete something, I can go to focus, I can come back, and this all looks good. So what we've done, I'm going to recap one more time and then we'll move on. What we've done is we've created a context that provides to anywhere in the React tree this, really this is a tuple, fancy word for an array that has a fixed and set number of things of certain types. This tuple has a tasks element and a set tasks element. This gives us access to this one value, this kind of synchronized value anywhere within our app. And instead of using that directly inside of a component like list screen, we are using it indirectly through our custom hook use task store. Use task store then grabs that value that's in the app up here through the context provider, through this use context hook, and brings those values here. Now we can use those in all of these functions that we had created before. And in case you've forgotten the benefit of this, I can use task store in our list screen, I can use it in our focus screen, and I'm not actually having to pass that in to every single component that I'm wanting to use this tasks API. Now I only have 2 components right now that are using that, but if we do end up creating, when we get to styling here, a custom checkbox and we wanted access to certain things like that, then that would just be a lot easier to manage. So I think we're done with this step here. There are a couple of data things I'm going to clean up, but we have our custom use task store hook. We're now using it in our various screens. I think we're good to go. So let us make a commit here. So we've moved a bunch of our data management to the use task store. We've added the task store context. We have the use task store hook. We're using it in our focus screen. We're using it in our list screen. Excellent. Add use task store hook. Okay. Now, there are a few bugs I want to wrap up, and then we'll get to styling. Okay, let's add second, third. If I go to my focus screen here, no incomplete tasks, yay. It's lying to us. And let's see why it's lying. It's lying because in our use task store, this is where we're managing our focus task. We're starting just with undefined. And we're starting with that because when we originally created this, we assumed that there would be no tasks in the beginning. But that's not true. We might have tasks because they might be pulling from local storage. So let's see where we should change this. So tasks and set tasks, this will come back initialized to us. We won't have to wait on anything here. So what I'm going to do is instead of saying just blatantly undefined, I'm going to say tasks 0, and then if this is present, then I'm going to do its ID. Now that is actually not going to work either because I only want incomplete tasks. So instead, I'm going to do task.filter, and let's select only the tasks where the task.isComplete is false. Then we'll grab the first one, and then if that exists, we'll get its ID. If it doesn't exist, it will be undefined. So let me save that. It refreshed over here, and we can see that it pulled our second task, which is a great test because it did not pull our first task, but it did pull our second task. Then if I go to focus and I hit nope, I only have 2 items here, so randomly selecting between these 2 doesn't provide a lot of entertainment here. But we can see it is going between the second and third tasks without selecting that first incomplete one. So that fixes that bug. Another bug I noticed earlier was that when we added one, it wasn't added to the focus screen. So let's make sure that that happens. Let me delete. And is that actually gonna, okay, that worked. So let me do first and see, okay, that works too. Second, focus, great. Now if I complete the first task, okay, it does move on to the second. So that's good. If I add a third here, and I complete the second one, that is not changing our state here. So it did complete the second one, but it's not changing this until I re-look at the focus screen. That is a little weird, so let's see what might be going on here. So an update task completion, we've got tasks, we're going through, we're updating the completion. Our focus task, we're finding the one that's focused. But whenever we're updating task completion, we're not actually selecting another incomplete task. So let's do that. This expression here is really finding our very first incomplete task. I'm going to turn that into a function. So I'm going to say get incomplete task is going to be a function that returns this same thing. And then in here, I'm going to call that function. Now, in update task completion, if the task ID is equal to the focus task ID, then we also want to update the focus task. If it's not equal, then we don't need to change it. We don't want to update the focus task just because we completed something else. But if our focus task is the one that is completed, then we want to update it. So then we'll set the focused task ID to equal our get incomplete task. That should work. Let's try it out. Okay, let's make a 4th, 5th, 6th task here. We've got our 3rd mark complete. No. Okay. It's like delayed. Okay, I think I have an idea as to why that is. So whenever this is called, we're running this function here. But at that point, when we call get incomplete task, this task's state may not actually be updated yet. So instead of that, there are a couple things I could do. I could use some sort of effect and listen for an update on that particular task. I think I can just move this up into the function itself. That sounds wrong though. Because then I have to return the tasks. I don't know if you can do a set within a set. That seems a little wrong. So what do I want to do here? Is there... Let's see. I want to update 2 different things. Okay, I think what we'll do... Okay, here's what we'll do. We're going to make this a function as well. So both of these are actually going to be a function. So we have the current ID. So if the task ID provided is the current ID, then we will return the get complete task. If it's not, then we want to return the current focus ID. So I'm actually going to do this a slightly different way. If the task ID is not the current focus ID, then just return the current one. Otherwise, return a new incomplete one. I think this will fix it. Okay, back to our list. I'm going to refresh. 7th, 8th, 8th. Focus, mark complete. No. Yeah, it's delaying there. Okay. Yeah, I really think that there's something to do with the tasks not being updated here. Okay. Next item, I think this might end up being better anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a use effect here. We're inside of a hook, so I can do this. I'm going to use a use effect, and I'm going to call this use effect function anytime our tasks change. And anytime our tasks change, I want to update this focus. So I'm going to end up removing that below. If the focus task is complete, then we need to change it. If it's been completed, we need to change it to a different one. So if it has, then we need to set focus task ID to a new ID, get incomplete task. And that gets rid of all of that. Now this is yelling at me. It's saying that focus task and get incomplete task are not in here. Get incomplete task is will actually change here. I think I will just copy this. That's going to get an incomplete task, and this one's going to get an incomplete task. So now we're left with focus task. So if task change or if focus task changes, then we're going to do this. Okay, third time's a charm, maybe? Clear. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, focus, complete. Okay, that works. Complete, 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 complete. So every time we complete one, it updates the focus task. Okay, one more test. Back to the list. Clear this. First, second, third. I keep misspelling third. On the focus screen, this will be first. If I complete the first task on the list screen, we also want that updated on the focus screen. And it does. It updates to the second task. So what happened here? We had some sort of React likely scheduling issue, a React scheduling issue, when we were trying to set the focus task in the update task completion handler here. So I'm sure there were several ways around it. The one we ended up finding that worked for us, I'm sure there are others, is this use effect hook. So we're going to run this function anytime tasks change or focus task changes. And inside of this, we're going to do a check to see if our current focus task is complete. If it is, then we kind of have an invalid state going on. So we need to set the focus task ID to something else. There probably is a better way to do this, so this might be something to revisit later to see if we can refactor this differently. But that completes the functionality side of the to-do app. So we can move on now to styling. Let's do it. Let's make our commit. So we fixed a few bugs here. Fix focused task bugs. Great. All right. Styling. We finally get there. So we want to make this app look like this app. There are tons of styling libraries out there. There's a new one every week. And there are some very interesting ones. In this episode, we're going to use styled components. Styled components has been a tried and true for a few years now. It's used by tons of companies as per their website, and it's a good one to start with. So let's install this into our setup here. So I'm going to just go to installation. As you might expect, we've got something like yarn add styled components. Now, since we are in Typescript, I happen to know, and we can see this here, that using Typescript with style components does not come with types built in. So we would need to install this @type/styled components as well. So we'll do both of those. Okay, so our terminal here, let's pull up our terminal and let's do a yarn add styled components. So So that's going to add it to our main dependencies list, styled components here. But then in our dev dependencies, we'd like to add types/styled components, hyphen capital D. We'll add that to our dev dependencies. So now we just have some nice types to work with in style components. Style components has a fairly straightforward API. We call this styled function that comes with the library, dot an HTML tag, and then in this template string, we can put our CSS. That returns a component, make this a little bigger for you, that returns a component that is a React component, which we can then use inside of our component. So where should we begin here? Let's start with kind of this box here. No, let's start with the tabs. We'll just start at the top. And we also want to take care of our background here, but I'm going to start at the top and then we'll move on to the background. So our list and focus tabs, those are inside of our app component. We have our nav wrapper, which wraps those. And then we have a nav link and a nav link. I have this hyphen between them, which we won't need because I just did that for our case, so I'm going to take that out. So these are right together now. And we really want it to look like this. So this is Figma. I'm going to be using this in here, and we are going to use Figma to inspect these elements so that we can recreate them. Okay, so our text, we've got 18 pixel font size here. I'm using Roboto. I can see I'm using Roboto everywhere. Okay. I've got this special yellow color. This is a height of 62. And I also have, these are the same width here. These are both 119. So whenever I'm translating something from a design over to the application, depends on which designer you're working with. Some do very, very pixel perfect, and you want to translate everything pixel for pixel, and some get them kind of most of the way here. I just happen to create this initial design, and so I might make a few tweaks along the way. For instance, 119, that number bothers me. We're going to do 120, so we're going to kind of stick to mostly even numbers here. So I'm going to make both of these tabs a 120 width and then 62 width. That's fine with me, or height is fine with me. We've got the color black, we've got the color yellow, we've got the color white, just trying to get a lay of the land of the styling here. So I might call these a tab button. So we want to create a tab button component. And that tab button has two different states. It has a selected state and just kind of a normal state or a default state. So I'm going to style it as if it were this focus one. That's going to be our normal state. And then we're going to have a special case for a selected state that makes it yellow here. So let's start with this one. I'm not going to worry about fonts yet. I'll get to that as well, maybe. So let us create a tab button. So I'm going to go in here and say const tab button. This is going to be styled, which will pull from styled components. Great. Now, normally you might do, .a for a link or .b for button, but in our case we have this component that comes from React Router. So what we can do is we can take this and call styled as a function here, pass that component, and then we still get this template string CSS. So I'm going to hard code the widths and heights because they are the same. Alternatively, sometimes you might do, padding horizontal here, but I want these tabs to be the same exact width always. So we'll do a width of 120 pixels. We'll do a height of our 62 pixels that we had. We have a background of black, and we have a font color of white. You notice I can use the shorthand colors in here, and that's fine. Now we have this tab button component. I can use this instead of the nav link component. So I'm going to use tab button. Now we have this. Now we can see it didn't follow all of our styling here, and that's because these are because they are A tags in HTML. Those are by default inline elements instead of block or inline block elements. So I want something that really allows these to operate as blocks. I could go ahead and set the type on here, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a nav component here. Const nav equals style.nav. Nav is an HTML tag, so we can just say style.nav here. And I want to make this a display flex. I love Flexbox. Flexbox is amazing. If you are not a master or at least novice at Flexbox, definitely something to study up. Because it's just such a great way to style things. And in fact, in React Native, everything's Flexbox. So we have a nav component here. I'm going to use that down here. And now we have this. Now these look huge because I'm fairly zoomed in here. Now within our tab buttons, I want everything centered. So even this in and of itself, I'm going to make a flexbox. And then I can do a justify items, center, and align items. I always get those wrong. Okay, justify content, I believe. Yes. Okay, we also want to text decoration none. Great. I'm a little surprised I'm not getting auto completion here for CSS. I'm kind of wondering if I bring up this file. Maybe not. Let's see. Do we have... Is there a style components extension? Looks like there is. VS Code styled components. It looks quite popular. Let's try it out. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be better. Okay, text decoration of none, so we're not underlined anymore. Okay, now we have our focused, or our selected state, I should say, or this calls it active. I like that. Our active state. There are a couple of different things that we could do here. We could continue to style them down here in the active style. But instead of that, I don't want to do that because that's some duplication there. Let's do active class name. And I'm just going to make up a class here. And I'm going to say that our active class name is active. And then we can use Sass-like syntax up here in style components and say this class that is .active, we're going to give this some different styles. So we want to pull in this yellow, which I'm probably going to put in a central place, which I will definitely put in a central place. So up in source, a lot of times I'll create either globals or a styles file, or a global styles file. I'll say styles for now. And I'm going to export const colors. And I could call this yellow, or I could call it primary. I'll call it primary. And if we change it from yellow, we'll be good. Okay, save that. I have the styles folder. So let's say, okay, our background is, here we go, completion. Our background is going to be what changes here. And we want to make this our primary color. And then on top of that, we want the text color to be black. There we go. So now our focus one is yellow, and we can see that here. Now one more stop is our rounded corners here. And we can see our border radius is 15 pixels. Again, we can use our ampersand here to say this class, and let's say if it's the nth child or first child, then I want the border top left radius to be 15 pixels, and then the border top bottom left radius to be 15. Now sometimes these kind of trip me up. I think this will work. Okay, yes. So first child, if it's the first child, do that. If it's the last child, meaning it's the last child of the parent component, then we're adjusting the style here. So in this case, we want to adjust the top right radius if it is the last component in the nav. And there we go. So we have these as well. Okay, that looks like a pretty nice tab bar. You know, one of the things that does happen whenever you add styles is definitely add some size to your file size. And so this would really be a good place to perhaps split out components even more. I'm going to leave this one in here for now because there are only so many other styles that we're going to end up putting in this screen because a lot of the rest of this exists in the list and focus screens. Okay, so that kind of shows you how to use style components to style a component, even using the CSS pseudo classes as well as custom class names, using both HTML tags and custom components, styling custom components as well. Now let's take a look at global styles. So, you know, I want to make sure our entire background is a dark gray here. Maybe pull in that Roboto font as well and get that going. So let's do that. I'm going to take a look at the style components documentation here. And I'm really looking for global styles. Let's see. Might be easier just to Google it. API reference, global, create global style. So here's an example here. So style components comes with a function called create global style. And this is where you might put things for your body tag, your HTML tag, your input tag, anything that just applies globally. You want to keep your global styles as minimal as possible, of course, because they will apply globally. But it's good for things like the HTML tag and things like that. So let's do just that. So in our app here, you could put create global style here. I'm actually going to create a separate file. I'm going to create a separate file, and I could just put it in the styles file. Let's do that. Okay, create global style from style components. And I'm going to make the body background a certain color. And let's figure out what that certain color is. That certain color is 2. Ah, okay. I did not realize that. So it creates a component to use. Okay. So export const global style. We will just follow their lead there. And we will end up using that component in here. I could leave it here. This would be totally fine. I'm actually going to put it above and then utilize React fragments to be able to put more than one child at this level. Because global style doesn't really have anything to do with router, it's totally separate from everything, then I kind of like doing that. Okay, that has changed our background color now. Let's do a couple of other things. Now a decent text color default would be white. So let's make our default text color white as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's a good, fairly good style to start with, I think. Now one more thing is I want to center these up, and then we can move on to our list components. So in our app here, we have, again, our navigation and we have our screen. That feels like some sort of layout component. So that's exactly what I'll create. So I'll go up to the top and I'm going to create a component called layout. And what I want this to be is, this is going to be a component that is the parent of our tabs as well as whatever is the current screen. So it's going to be a parent with 2 children in it. I'm also going to make it a flexbox, like I'm going to make a lot of things. It's going to be a columnar flexbox, so its flex direction will be a column. And I want to align everything to be center. So that will be an align items center, I believe. So we don't need this BR anymore. And I'm going to wrap both of our nav and our switch, which controls the screen, inside of this layout. So let's save that. Great, we have this centered now. They are stacked in a column. Now let's add this padding that we have. So from the top, we have a padding of 35 pixels. So this layout would be a good place to put that. However, we also have a padding of 46 down to the screen. I might make that 45. Okay, so we have 35 and 45. So on the layout, I think what I'll do is I'll add a padding to the layout. I'm going to add it all the way around, 35 pixels. But then on the tab, or in the navigation, I might go ahead and put a margin bottom here. And we'll say 45 pixels. And that separates everything out. Okay, so we have our global styles going. We have our layout for our app. We've got our tab bar. Let's move on to the styling of the list view. Okay, so we have this other gray color here, I think. Oh, okay, that's actually white. It's actually 10% white. Okay. We've got all of our tasks. We have this trash can. That'll be interesting. And we have a custom checkbox. That'll be very interesting. Okay, let's start with this box. So this box it's 463. We'll make it 460. And it is a 10% white. So let me go into the list screen. And we have our views down below. And I'm going to create, a lot of times, whenever you're creating these styles, you'll end up coming up with very consistent hopefully names. So a lot of times in the parent-most component within a component, or the parent-most child within a component, I will call container. So I'm gonna leave props down closer to the component. So I'm gonna make a component, styled component, called container. So we'll do a styled div, and we need to pull in styled. And this will have that background color, and we're also going to have our border radius of 15. So our border radius of 15 pixels, and our background color, we said 10% white. So I'll use RBGA here, and I'll do white. White is 255 all the way across, and our A will be 0.10 or 0.1 for 10%. Save that. We're not using our container, that's why it doesn't show up. So we'll replace the outermost div with our container component. And we have that here. Now, actually, it's not our outermost div because we have add a task and clear completed down below. So it's not that at all, it is this div here. Okay, so we can see that that is wrapping our tasks. Now let's set a width on this. Let's set a width on this of, I think I said 460. 460. Now, hard-coded widths, often a bad idea because you know, the mobile issue. But what we can do is we can set a width, but then also set a max width of 100%. This is a common use case, and I may have gotten this backwards. I do that sometimes. Okay, let's say width. Sometimes that takes a few tries. Width and max width. Okay, that's not it either. That might be because we're in, no, we're not in a flexbox because we're within a div here. Okay, I'm curious as to why that didn't work. Am I just tripping out here? Okay, I'm sure I'm forgetting something simple here, but let's keep going. So we're going to instead, forget this for a second. We're going to instead create a layout. Again, I'm going to call this list, since now this is only the list. And I'm going to call this layout, or I said container. Now I'll create another container here. And this is going to be the container that holds these three items. So we have our list view, our input, and our clear completed button. So this container is going to be, you guessed it, a flexbox. It's going to be a flex direction of column. And these two items are actually full width, and then this one is centered. So in this, let us say align items stretch, and that will stretch the items across. And then the clear button, we're going to align that center. So let's use our container component and see what we have going here. Okay, not a lot changed there. That is not too surprising. I think, actually I did expect the button to expand. Let's try center here. Make sure this is, okay, that's center and then stretch. Okay, I'm a little surprised the button did expand. Actually, no, the button's in a div. That's why it didn't expand. Let's take that out of the div. Okay, now expand it. So everything is stretching to the container here. Let us make sure that this clear button, though, is centered. Now, we have two different places in our app where we have this type of like text button. So we have this little clear completed, and then we have this little nope over here. So I'm going to create a component that we can reuse between those screens. I'm going to call it text button. So in my file tree, I'm going to create yet another directory called components. And I'm going to create a text button .ts. Now you might think TSX, but in this case, we're just going to export directly from what styled components is generating for us. So let us create a component called text button. This is going to be from styled. It's going to be an HTML button type. And it's going to have no background. And the text color is going to be a text color gray here. So I'm just going to pull this color for now. And we might want to adjust the size because it's a bit of a smaller size. It's 14. So we'll do font size 14 pixels. And then I'm going to export this as the default export here. Okay, now this is exporting a full-on component. So instead of just using button here, I'm going to use text button from our exported component. I'll save that, and we have that here. Now there's, of course, other styles that I've forgotten to clear out here. We have this border, so that's fine. Let's do that. And there is one other case. I'm going to comment out background none for now because I want to show off that this is stretching. And in our list screen, just inline I think would be fine. I want to overwrite this align, how this is aligned. So I'm going to say align self, and I'm going to align it to the center. And that will center up just this button. So everything in this container component is of align items stretch. So it's stretching to the full, in this case, width, because it's a column, stretching to the full width of the container. But the button is aligning itself to the center. So that's fine. So back in our text button, we'll say background none, and then I'm pretty sure this other stuff is on border. We'll say border none. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so we have this. Now, the width of this box, this is something we can solve with the flex value of the container itself. So the flex value can get a little confusing. It has several different properties. The first is how it stretches and how it grows, flex grow. We want to say that by default this is 460 pixels wide. If the screen is smaller, we do want it to shrink, but if it's larger, we don't want it to grow. So we're going to say 0 for grow, 1 for shrink, and 460 pixels by default. Cross your fingers. I think that's going to work. Maybe. Okay, let's see. We might also have to do an align self on here because this is aligning center. Okay. Yeah. So the outer layout was aligning everything center, so we had to do that. So we have the padding, so we can see the padding on both of these sides from our outermost layout in the app component. And then we do see that this is stretching, but it should only stretch to a certain degree, and that is not the case. Okay, so I don't want that. Oh, I don't want this. Okay, I'm still not totally sure why this isn't taking our 460 size. That may actually be defining its vertical size. I think that is because the direction of the parent layout is a column, so this is actually defining its width. That's not what we want at all. So let's do I'm going to again do a width of 460 here, and I think I'm just forgetting something. That's not what I want. Okay, I'm stumping myself here. We'll see if I think of that solution to that as we go. Seems like a simple problem, but I'm live television people. Okay, so let's continue on to our input box here. So we have I think it's black. We have a 50% black input box, and then the text in it. Right now, this is placeholder text, so that's pretty faint. We'll probably want white text in the input when we're actually typing. So let's see, we have our input here. We don't have any other inputs in the app. If we did, I'd probably make a component. I might still make a component, but let's go ahead and just put it here. So const input. A lot of times it's just very easy to capitalize, the HTML tag that you're wanting to do. So lowercase input will be your HTML input. Capital I input will be our styled component here. So let's do a background of 50% black. So black is zeros all across. 50% would be 0.5. Let's do a color, that's a font color of white. And we'll do our border radius, it's probably 15 pixels. Okay, let's see how that turned out. We're not using our input component. Let's use it. Okay, we have this lovely border and shadow down here. Let's see, so let's do a border of none. Kind of funny that you do a border none, but you do a border radius. And we're typing, we do have white text. Let's go ahead and set, we've got 62 pixel height on this, and then we have a good amount of padding. Let's do a 24 pixel horizontal and 20 pixel vertical padding. Let's try that. So I said 20 pixel vertical, 24 pixel horizontal. Okay, we have this in here. Let's, again, I'm fairly zoomed in my right hand side here. Let's separate these out now. There are a couple of different ways to separate things. Earlier in the app, we created a margin bottom on the tabs up here in order to separate this other content. There's this really interesting article out there. I forget who wrote it. It might even be Max Stroiber. Probably butchered his last name, but the creative style components. Might be him, might be someone else. About how margins are generally considered bad or generally considered dangerous. And that's because if you use things around your app, you might not know what kind of margin they're creating between items. And so, because margin affects the space outside of your component rather than inside of it, like padding. So one alternative to margin, which I'm going to use in this case just to show this off, is creating something like a spacer. So I'm going to create a spacer here. This is going to be a spacer component. So import React from React. I want to create a component that can accept either height or width So height. So height would be a number. Width, I'm going to say would be never. And then or it's going to be a height of never or a width of number. So this is a fancy way of saying it's either one of these but not the other. So I'm going to create a const spacer component which will accept props of height or width. Let's type this. So this is react.function component. The props are of type props, and we're bringing this in. What we're going to return, we're just going to return a simple div. And the style of this will be a specific height and width dimension. So this is just an empty div. Kind of think of it like spacer GIFs we used to use way back in the day. So I'm going to export default spacer. So this is really just a fancier way to create a div that's a certain height or width that will allow us to space things out. Just an alternative to using margins. Not saying that I think I do prefer this method, but you use what you want. You can use margins or you can use spacers. So let's look at spacer in action. So in our list screen here, let's create a spacer between the list and the input. We're going to make this height 30. Did I import that? I did. Oh, I think I need to make height width. There we go. Okay, height of 30, and then below that, 45. So we're just spacing these items out. And there we go. So that's an alternative to using margins. Now I can put this input anywhere. I don't have a margin on it that's going to affect other things or this button. So I like that solution. Let's move on to this list. This will be interesting. I feel like I keep saying that. Okay, let's look at the padding of this list. So we've got at least a 24 pixel padding over here on the left and right, and around a 45 pixel at the top. So we'll do that. So on our list, let's make a padding of vertical 45 pixels, horizontal 24 pixels. Okay, that looks a little better. Probably gonna save the custom checkbox towards the end here, and we'll get to that. But let's continue on in our list items. So we have our delete button, and we have our label. Here's another interesting case for a spacer here. So we have a space between these items, so that's 24 pixels. So I'm going to put a spacer here of a width of 24. Actually, I could probably just do that on label. I think I will. So I'm going to make this a label tag and then style that with style components. So I'm going to make a label component. So const label styled dot label. And I think what else I would like to do here is move the checkbox inside of label. That is often done when you want to actually be able to click on the label and have that check the box. Let's make sure that that works before we move on. Make sure I'm not forgetting something. Okay, styled label. Let's save all this. Okay, yes. So if you put your checkbox inside of the label, then that's an easy way to get the checkbox to check by clicking on the label. I like that. So this is really going to be our list item because it's going to wrap different things and it's going to be a label. And let's see. So let's see if we can't also move our delete button in here now that this is a list item. So we're going to move delete in here, and then we relabel the label to list item. And let's see if this works. Okay, looks a little wonky. We're getting there though. Okay, list is a vertical list. So let's do a flex box. Display flex, flex direction, column. Great. We've got some, I will use margin on the items. We've got a margin of 8 with maybe a little extra there. We'll start with 8. So list item, I will do just a margin bottom on that. That's fine. Our delete button, we want to go to the right-hand side. This is another interesting case for spacer. So let's make another prop on spacer called spacer flex 1. And so what I want to do is I want to make, we don't need that, I want to make a list item, a flex box itself, have these items align horizontally, and then use this spacer to shove the delete button over to the right. So let me comment this out and we'll walk through this. So list item is display flex. Nothing will change here. But we want that delete to go to the right hand side. So flex of 1, that means, remember we talked about it being grow. That's the first parameter. And the same when you use only one parameter of flexbox. So I'm going to create another prop here, and there might be an even fancier way to say only one of these. So if I had a lot, I'd probably look this up, but not live. So flex, where flex is a number, height is a never, width is a never, and then I'm gonna say flex on these is also a never. This is just a way I want to say only one of these at a time. And so flex, flex, you wouldn't really have to do it this way. You could just do all of them. So let's go back into our list and do our spacer of flex 1. And it should, yes, so right here there's like an invisible stretching device in here that shoves our delete button over to the right hand side. Okay, let us style the delete button now. Okay, so our delete button is this fancy icon. And one of the cool things about React and icons like this is just, we can make this into an SVG. What is this part? We can make this into an SVG and then just use that SVG. So here in Figma, I can just copy as SVG. And SVG elements make great React components. So I'm going to make yet another folder. I'm going to call it icons. I'm going to say delete icon.tsx. And we'll create a React component here. Delete icon. We're going to return this SVG. We'll have to do a little bit of editing. Export default, delete icon. Great. Anything that actually, did that fix itself? No, okay, it's like that. This actually, I don't think we have to fix anything in here. Sometimes you do have to fix things. We might have to delete this XML namespace, I can't remember. Okay, so we have our delete icon. That's just an SVG element. We can now use that here and here. I'm still going to put this inside of a button. So delete icon. Still going to put this inside of a button here, but we're going to make this button special to where it can handle icons. So I'm going to create a component called icon button because we might want to use this later on in other places. Icon button. And what this component is designed to do is have an icon inside of it, but not really have any other style. So let's do icon button, styled dot button, and this is going to have no background. That's we know that for sure. Export default icon button. We'll use that in our list screen. So instead of a regular button, we'll use icon button. Okay, let's get rid of our border around that. Border none. And there we go. Okay, so we have our icons. They do still work, actually, too. And there we go. And let's see, first, second, third. I forgot this all still works. Fourth. And we have all of our icons. Now, we only want those to show up on hover. So let us work on that. Now this icon button, that's pretty generic. I wouldn't want to do any hover effects on that, but in this specific case, I do. So how could we do that? I could add a prop to icon button that says hover only, or show on hover. I think I'll do that. So one thing that you can do on styled components is add special props to them. So let's make a props type up here, and we will say hover, let's see, show on hover. We'll make that a Boolean. And I'm going to pass in to this generic that we use these props. So now, if we can use template strings in here to modify the CSS depending on these props passed in. So this is going to be a function here, and this function is going to return a string. And in this, we will have access to props show on hover. That's the property we have. So if this is, let me get rid of that. So if this component has the property show on hover and it evaluates to true, then we want to add some additional styles. So we want to add a style of display none, and then on hover, let's do a style of display button would be inline block, I believe. Whoa. Okay, so it doesn't like that. Oh, it says it's required. Okay, this is not a required prop. So we don't need to do that. Okay, now let's go and add this in. And because everything's typed, it should show up just fine on here. So show on hover. We want it to be true, so we don't have to put anything else here. And there we go. So now it should display none is a bad idea. We want visibility hidden. That's what we want. Visibility hidden. And I think I'm already going to have to change how we do this. Visibility visible. Okay, this, let's save that. Okay, this is not picking up on my hovers for some reason, but I do want to change this anyway. So what I expected this to do is I expected this to show when I hovered over the icon, but I also want it to show just when I hover over the row itself. So we need to change up some things here. I'm gonna back out of this approach because that approach would have only shown again when we're hovering over the button. That's not what I want to do. So we don't have this show on hover anymore. Instead, I want this to the trash can icon, the delete icon, to show when we're hovering over a specific row. So there's some kind of fancy ways to do that. Icon button is itself a styled component, but I want to customize that further just for this screen. So you can style a styled component. Let's do delete button, and we're going to do styled and pass in our generic icon button, and then create some CSS from here. All right, so instead of icon button, we're going to use delete button. This won't change anything visually quite yet. But what this will allow us to do is it will allow us to customize even further the styles of this button. What we want to happen is, again, we want this to be hidden until we hover over the row, and then we want it to be shown. So what we can do in that case is you can use, I believe, a component as a CSS class name here. So I could say list item space ampersand, so this button. So when we hover over a list item, then we want to do some styles. So visibility is going to be visible, but by default, visibility is going to be hidden. Okay, it's hidden. That's for the first half. Okay, now it's visible. So we can see that that delete icon is showing up. This is normally where you might put, you know, a class name or, you know, a class name or something like that. But because styled components is creating the class name for you, then you can use the component itself with the magic of template strings or string templates, template strings, and this will insert the class name, the dynamically created class name for you. So on the list item hover, and the ampersand is referencing this class itself, we want this to be visible. So we have these here. Now there's one other thing that I don't like about this, and that's because we have a margin on the items, then there's this blinking when I'm going between rows. I'd really just like for it to be trash can, trash can, trash can, instead of trash can, off, trash can, off, trash can. So on the list item, we're gonna remove the margin, and we're just going to increase, or I guess create, we're gonna change the margin to padding. So let's do a padding top and bottom of 4 pixels, and that should achieve the same effect while making these delete icons showing and hiding a bit nicer. I like it. Okay, one other thing, and oh, let's add a placeholder here. So what's our placeholder? Add a task. Great. So in our input, I'm going to make a placeholder, add a task. Okay, and then, so that's a nice gray color. And then when you type, then that becomes a white color. Still have our trash cans. We can go to our focus view. Okay, this is looking good. Okay, let us style, let's add some space in here. So between our input and our label, I'm probably just gonna use another spacer component because those are nice. Do a width and 24. There we go. That may be a bit much, or it may be just right. Okay, 24 in here. This font size is 18 pixels. So let's update the font size in here, and that will probably help. Font size, 18 pixels. Okay, and we also want, I kind of want all of these things vertically centered. You can see how the checkboxes are really higher than the label. So let's do an align items of center. And that should vertically center everything. Okay, that's good. Now, we have the custom checkbox that we're going to want to create. And I think this is looking pretty good otherwise. I do want to pull in the Roboto font though, and make it look a bit more like this design. So let's do that. There's a few different ways. Google Fonts React. I may blank on, or Google Fonts NPM React. Next, use Google Fonts. Is it this one? That's a low weekly download. Let's look at Google Fonts NPM. I think I'm blanking on the one we typically use. Let me just pull it in myself. Okay, fonts.google.com. And here's Roboto. I think we probably just need one style. I think I'm pretty much using normal weight everywhere. So I'm looking at my weights here. I've got 400 is normal, normal. This one might be large. No, that's normal. Okay, I think everything's normal. So we just need one weight. So let's do regular 400, select the style, and this will be fine. We'll do a link tag, and then it pulls in Roboto. Okay, so I'm going to pull this in. Let's go to our index.html. We'll add this to our HTML file. We'll refresh, and then we'll go to our styles and update this. So in both our body, you have to do this in a few different places. Our body and also inputs, there might even be more. We want to use the font family of Roboto, and it had some suggestions. Sans serif. That sounds good. Okay, now we are using the Roboto font. Great. Okay, let's move on to focus, and then may swing around to this checkbox here at the end. Okay, list screen is looking pretty good other than our checkbox here. So in our focus screen, we have just, we have mark completed at the bottom, we have nope at the bottom, and we have this giant one task that we're focusing on. Okay, let us do that. So if we look at this layout here, I can see that these items I kind of want to be affixed to the bottom of the screen. And then I want this content in here to stretch vertically with the screen. But in here I have everything at the top. So let's work on that. So our focus screen, we've got our focus task, we have our button. This is a text button. We've already created a text button before, so we can use that here and pull that right in. Nope. Let's pull in let's create a component called container. That's going to be our overall layout. Div. And this is going to be a display flex, love flex, and it's going to be a column. Okay, and then we're going to align everything in that column to the center. Great. Now this, I'd like for this to stretch vertically. So there are two different ways I could do that. I'm going to create a component called task, which is just going to be the container for our task label here. So I'm going to do const task styled.div, and this one will be we want the height of this to stretch. So that's not sure that that's going to work. Yeah, in this case, align items is going to be horizontal. We actually want a vertical stretch. In that case, that's going to be a flex of 1 because we want it to grow. However, it's only going to grow, or this layout is only going to grow as far as the parent container will allow it. And right now, we can't really see this, but I kind of just know that it's happening. The parent container is only this tall. We want this to be full height. So let's go into our app, and we need to make sure that the overall layout here has at least a minimum height of 100 viewport height. And so that will create this, let's see, yeah, that will allow this parentmost component to have 100 viewport height. Now, we do have, so here's our nav, that looks good, but then the screen also is not taking on its full space either. So in the focus screen, in this container, we also need to put a flex of 1 so that the screen itself will take up the full amount of space so that it will grow. Okay, and that's what we expect. Now I've got some, so this, that's funny. I can't believe I've gotten this far. One of the most common things you'll see is changing everything to be styled with border box. So box sizing, border box. That says that our padding lies inside of a container. And that's what was happening here. That was what was pushing these buttons out of the way because we have a padding on this overall layout. And I want that to be calculated inside the container. So for every element on the page, this is very, very common on the web. We want everything to be sized with border box. Okay, so now this third label, this is actually going to stretch in, it's going to stretch in all of this available space because we have the flex grow property set to 1. Awesome. That's what we want. Okay, now we want to vertically center that text. So we will also make this set to display flex. We will align its items to center, and we will justify its content to center. And that will center up the text for us. I think this is giant text, size 32. So we'll do a font size of 32 pixels. Great. Got our note button. Let's do this button as well. Now this, we only have one button in this app, but this I might call like our standard button. If we had several more screens within this app, this looks like what would be our standard button. So I'm going to create a button component here, and we will use that. So let's go to our components directory. I'm going to create just button.ts, because I won't need to customize this further. We'll just use the style components API here. So const button button equals styled dot button, and our styled button will have, we've been tricked by our border before, no border, a border radius of 15 pixels. It will have a color, a font color of black. It will have a background color of our yellow, or really our primary color. And we're gonna have some padding in here too, though I'm not totally sure what that's going to be. I might just set a height on this button. I'll do that for now. I've been starting to do that more lately, just making sure that these that buttons are a set height. You rarely want a button to wrap. So export default button. And in our focus screen, we will use our button, imported from components button. I didn't save everything. Okay, mark completed. Let's see, I did capitalize that here, and let's make sure we have, oops. Let's make sure we have a padding. Let's see what this is. That's 29 pixels, so we'll make it 30. So let me capitalize that M so it matches the design. And we'll do a padding left of 30 pixels and a padding right of 30 pixels. Okay, we want some space between mark completed and nope. That might be another good case for spacer. So let's take a look here. And there's 45 pixels of space between those. Great. So spacer, height of 45 pixels. Save that. And there we go. That is our focus screen. So we have our list screen and our focus screen. Those are nicely styled here. And this should scroll, that's good. This comes in, that's good. I might want to add some padding around this. In fact, I will. Focus, so this is our task component. Let's just put an overall padding of 45 pixels on this. So make sure that we have plenty of padding in here. We already have some padding below the tabs, or spacer below the tabs, so I might just add that padding on the bottom to help center it up better. Okay, that's good. So this scrolls, that's good. Still, I'm blanking a little bit on this width issue. I'm gonna have to figure that out later. Okay, Let's commit and let's tackle this custom checkbox. Sounds hard, but I think we can do it. I found a great article about this the other day. Might have to pull that up. Let's commit. So add styling. We haven't committed since we started. So add styled components and a lot of app styling. Sounds great. Okay, custom checkbox component. There is a good article I found, custom React checkbox component. I know it was on Medium. I'll probably pull up here. Building a checkbox component with React and styled components. Everything you needed to know. So the trick here is that there is no way to style a checkbox really on the web. And so what you have to do is you have to create a hidden checkbox so that you still have the functionality of the checkbox, but then create kind of a faux visual that allows you to create that style that you want. So in their case, they're using a class component. We'll of course be using functional components and hooks, and we'll create something that is very similar. So they have a hidden checkbox in here, a styled checkbox, a checkbox container, and this is the component. They also have a way to style the focus state. That's always good. They add a check mark icon. So this is good. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy some of these in, and then we'll start customizing it for our needs. So let's create a checkbox component. So checkbox.tsx, because we will be writing JSX in here. So I'm going to copy in our hidden checkbox and their styled checkbox. They have a transition on it. And checkbox container. I'm going to put that at the top. And the actual checkbox itself. Okay, we'll pull in styled. We will pull in React. And do we need anything else? We don't need an icon. We will need checked. Let's see, props. Okay, so we're going to have a prop on this styled checkbox of checked. So that's going to be checked, and that's going to be some sort of Boolean. So we have a wrapper component, then we have the hidden checkbox. That's the real HTML checkbox. And then we have a styled checkbox that we're actually going to style. Okay, let us do that. Let's save this. I have no idea what this looks like. Let's save this and actually bring it into our app, see what it looks like. Okay, not on the focus screen. This will be on our list screen. So instead of our input type of checkbox here, we will have a checkbox component, which is not going to import for me nicely. Checkbox. There we go. Okay, type is not necessary, checked is good. This doesn't have the onChange attribute. So we do want to add that. So let's make this a React function component. Let's create a props type like we usually do. And let's pull in a few things. So checked is going to be a Boolean. We do want to require that. The rest of the props go onto the hidden checkbox here. Class name is pulled out from the top. That's fine. Okay, so this spread of props over onto the hidden checkbox, we want to allow basically passing anything in to this that would normally go into a regular checkbox. So I'm going to say component props HTML props of so much fail. This is component props of, oh my gosh, I'm so blanking here. React, no, I don't want to group tabs together. React component props for HTML tag. Typescript type. Okay. HTML props, HTML button element. Okay, thank you. HTML props of HTML. This is going to be an input element. So this is how we are saying that the props that will be allowed here will be anything that's normally allowed on HTML input, because our hidden checkbox is an input, and this checked Boolean. So this is mad at us for some reason. Oh, okay. Let's see. String is not assignable to type checkbox. This might need to be I don't think that'll fix it. No. Okay, string, do I need to just do type checkbox? Okay, so this up here is saying that this is always a checkbox as defined on input. Okay, I'm really not sure why this is mad at us. Oh, I do want to, I'm gonna spread props first. Okay. Property, types of property type are incompatible. String or undefined is not assignable to type checkbox or undefined. Okay, so in props here, this is allowing us, because we're spreading, this is allowing us to pull in type. I don't want that. So I want to pull type out. I kind of expected that to fix it. I want to pull type out before I gather the props. Let's see if there's something else wrong. String is not assignable to type, blah, 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 blah. Let me take this off. This might be causing us issues. And let's add a type checkbox on here. Now I'm wondering if, is there like an HTML Let me take a look at this. Well, no, that's fine. Hidden checkbox. String is not assignable to ref. Okay, so there may be various things we can't actually spread onto a styled component type. I'd probably want to look, oh look, here we have styled component input, any, never. This may actually be a better way than this up here because we are passing this to a styled component. Let's try that. I actually haven't done that before, but let's try that. So styled component, oh look, here's a styled component props, and let's do an input. Let's see what that takes. So styled component props, React component type, props are derived. Let's look at this real fast and then we'll move on. For HTML element. Okay, I'd probably want to look into further what to pass in here, but here's what I'm going to do for now. I'm going to, because I know that I want to be able to pass in on change. That's the main thing I want. So I'm going to pull all of this out. I want to be able to pass in on change. So the types are happy now because there's basically nothing in props, except children. So I want to be able to pass in on change. Again, I really want to figure out how to do the component props here. Oh, maybe I can do, I can't do styled component here, can I? Probably not, no. Style component, any props, and does that work? Okay, that may work. Maybe. That might work. Might want to do a little more research on that. That might work. Okay, so this should be able to, let me see if I can checkbox. Let's see. Is this going to be happy with me? Okay, we're making some progress here. Let's see, so we have checkbox checked on change. We do have these are checked and they are updating. Okay, so that's something I learned new live here. So we can pass in style component in here, it looks like, into component props as a generic. Say that it's an input so that it knows what to get on there. We for sure want to check which is Boolean, which we honestly may not even need since that's on input already. Yeah, we don't even need that because checked already comes on the input tag. Okay, interesting. So let's style this checkbox. So this is, it's always going to be a circle. It's either going to be filled or it's not going to be filled. So this is a 25 pixel size circle with a 3 pixel border size. So our checkbox, styled checkbox, this is 25 pixels large. We also have the background. If it's checked, then we want this to be our color. So colors, colors dot primary. or we want it to be none. It's going to animate for us. Border radius of just very large. And we do want a border on it. So a border of 3 pixels, solid, and then our primary color. And there we go. I do kind of like the animation that came with it. I might go a little faster. Oops. There we go. All right. Great. Okay, and that is a custom checkbox. Before we move off of that, let's inspect this a bit because I want to see what came about here. So if I look at this element, we can see that here's our wrapper. We have the checkbox. We can see when it is changing. We should be able to see when it's changing between checked or not. Var of any. No, I think I want. That should be selected in here. Because you should be able to. Oh, we can do this. Okay. So it is selecting and not selecting. Because I'm focused on it, and I can select and unselect them. I would expect that to show up in here. Oh, there's checked. Maybe I was just missing it. So it's checked and not checked. Is that right? Seems a little weird to me. I would expect to be seeing this live. See, because that is checked, and then if I look at another one up here, this one's not checked. I would expect to be seeing that change live. I think that is a bit weird as to why it's not. So that one may take a little bit of further debugging to see what's going on there. I'm honestly not totally sure. But we do have the functionality working. It's not classifying the input type as checked here. Or it's not showing it. I believe that Chrome Inspector. So we would need to look at this further to see why is this checkbox, why is this not really getting checked? Yeah. All right. So let us add this, and we'll just know that we need to look into that later. So add custom checkbox. Save all and commit. Well, there you have it, folks. We have created our custom to-do list built with React, Typescript, custom hooks, custom checkbox, and focus screen. We do have a couple of things that you'd want to look into afterwards. We want to make sure that this checkbox input element is getting checked. And for some reason, I am blanking on controlling the width of this, but I'm sure I'll remember right after I end this stream. But we've got our state saving to local storage. We can refresh and get back to where we were. We've got React router for the routes up here. We can mark things complete and move on. No incomplete tasks, yay. We can add tasks, yay. We can delete things from here. We can clear completed, and we can focus. Pretty cool, overall pretty cool to-do list here. I sure hope this series has been helpful for you, parts 1 and 2. There's a lot going on here, but we really walked through it from nothing all the way to finished or near finished. So I'll post this code up on GitHub for you to take a look at. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful to you, if you learned anything new here. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to me. That would really be awesome for my channel. So thanks for watching today. Hope you have a good one, and I'll see you next time.